I'm Dave Cummins from Future Property Group, and welcome to the Future of Sustainable Development, the podcast where we explore the ideas shaping tomorrow's built environment. Today, we're exploring the importance of living building challenge. What is it, why it's important, and how can we embrace it? The Living Building Challenge is often described as the world's most rigorous performance standards and sustainable buildings. But I think it's something more bigger. It's not about making buildings that do less harm. It's actually about creating buildings that give back more than they take. A living building is designed to function like a flower, self-sufficient in energy and water, built from materials that are safe and regenerative, and deeply connected to the ecosystem and community around it. The history of the challenge goes back to 2006, when the International Living Future Institute launched. It is a way of radically rethinking architecture. Green building standards already exist. The lead is in the United States, the BREEAM is in the UK, Green Star in Australia. And the Living Building Challenge set a higher bar. It asked, what if buildings could generate all their own energy, capture and treat their own water, and use materials that are healthy for people and the planet? What if they could, quite literally, live? The benefits are extraordinary. Take energy, for example. The World Green Building Council has shown that the built environment contributes 39% of global carbon emissions, 28% from operations, 11% from materials. The Living Building Challenge requires net positive energy, which means buildings don't just reduce energy demand, they generate more renewable energy than they consume. Research in energy and buildings show that the net zero and net positive buildings can cut carbon emissions by 80 to 100% compared to conventional designs. Imagine if every building wasn't part of the climate problem, but part of the climate solution. Water is another one. In many cities, stormwater overflows pollute rivers, while drafts drain drinking supplies. The Living Building Challenge requires buildings to meet 100% of their water needs through captured precipitation or closed-loop systems. A study in the Journal of Environmental Management showed rainwater harvesting systems can reduce water demands by up to 60%. In other words, a living building doesn't just turn off the tap, it makes its own. Materials matter too. A study in environmental science and technology showed that construction materials contribute to 11% of global greenhouse emissions and often release harmful chemicals into indoor air. The Living Building Challenge bans red list chemicals, things like PVC, formaldehyde, and certain flame retardants that are toxic to people and the planet. Research in the Journal of Exposure Science and Environmental Epidemiology has found that exposure to these chemicals is linked to respiratory problems, endocrine disruption, and cancer risks. By eliminating them, the Living Building Challenge can help create healthier environments for occupants and reduce long-term health costs to society. The economic case is compelling. The Journal of Sustainable Real Estate reported that sustainable buildings rent for up to 3% more and sell for about 16% more. CBRE found that occupancy rates in green buildings are 3 to 6% higher. Deloitte's research showed that 75% of Australians are willing to pay more for sustainable housing. But when developers worry about cost, they're missing the big picture. Human-centered, regenerative buildings don't just perform better environmentally, they perform better financially. But if the benefits are this strong, why isn't every building a living building? The first barrier is cost perception. Developers see the upfront price tag of renewable systems, rainwater harvesting, and healthy materials, but they often ignore the life cycle value. Studies in building research and information show that green buildings have lower long-term operation costs and higher asset values. Yet short-term thinking still dominates the industry. The second barrier is culture. For decades, property has celebrated speed, scale, and profit above all else. The World Economic Forum highlights that construction is responsible for nearly 30% of biodiversity loss, yet we still call shiny glass towers progress. The Living Building Challenge flips this narrative. It asks us to measure success, not in square meters built, but in ecosystem restored, health improved, and communities empowered. The third barrier is complexity. The challenge is rigorous. Certification requires 12 months of actual performance data, providing that the building meets net positive energy and water targets in real life, not just on paper. That level of accountability scares some developers, and it's also what makes the certification so powerful. Unlike many rating systems, you can't game the living building challenge with paperwork. You have to live it. And then there's invested interests. If buildings make their own energy, utilities sell less electricity. If they harvest rainwater, water utilities sell less water. Change disrupts business models, and those profiteering from old systems aren't always eager to embrace the new. Yet despite the resistance, the world is already proving it can be done. One of the first certified living building challenges was the Built Center in Seattle, often called the greenest commercial building in the world. It generates more electricity than it uses through rooftop solar, harvests rainwater for all its needs, and composts waste on site. In Australia, the Sustainable Building Research Centre at the University of Wollongong achieved living building accreditation and certification, showcasing regenerative design in an educational setting. Internationally, the Van Diesen Botanical Gardens Visitor Centre in Vancouver and the Phillips Centre for Sustainable Landscapes in Pittsburgh also celebrate examples of how architecture can integrate with ecology. These aren't fringe benefits, they're proof that the future is already here. So how do we embrace more of this? First, standardization. Governments can set living building principles as defaults, like mandating net zero energy for new public buildings and banning toxic red list chemicals. Second, finance. Green bonds, sustainability-linked loans and tax incentives can make regenerative design the most financially attractive choice. Third, knowledge. Universities, industry bodies, and institutes must integrate the living building principles into training so that architects, engineers, and builders help set the norm, not the expectation. And finally, culture. We need to shift the story of progress from steel and concrete to self-sufficient, living, giving buildings. What would happen if we built more living buildings? Cities would become power plants instead of power drains. Water systems would be decentralized, reducing drought stress and flood risk. Indoor air would be cleaner, boosting human health and productivity. Buildings would become biodiversity sanctuaries, not biodiversity killers. Economies would thrive on the back of resilience, future-proofed assets, and communities would feel empowered, knowing their built environment wasn't just reducing harm, but actively making things better. The take-home message is this: Living Building Challenge is not a utopian dream. It's happening now, and is proving that we can build differently. It shows us that buildings can be regenerative, not extractive, and that it can heal ecosystems instead of destroying them, that they can empower communities instead of draining them. When we embrace the Living Building Challenge, we redefine what's possible. We prove that sustainability isn't about sacrifice, it's about abundance. Abundance of energy, abundance of water, abundance of health, abundance of biodiversity. We prove that the places we live and work in can help inspire us, heal us, and give us hope. Thanks for tuning in to the future of sustainable development. Join us next time as we uncover fresh research, new innovations, and best practices for building smarter, greener, and more resilient buildings. Until then, let's continue to build places that heal the land and empower communities for tomorrow.